Okay, let's get started. My name is David Fass. I'm the trainer at iNetSoft, and this is the latest in a sequence of webinars that we've been doing to introduce some basic topics. The topic today is improving dashboard appearance. So really dealing with just the visual aesthetic aspect of dashboards, although we'll cover some other topics also. First, just a note, for those who might be listening to this video and were also actually in the webinar where we covered this material, you may notice some differences between the video and what you actually heard live. And so don't worry, that's not your mind playing tricks with you. This is actually a video. The video you're listening to is a video I made after the webinar because the original video did not process correctly, so I was left with no video, so this is the video. So so if there are some slight differences, I apologize, but I'll try to adhere for the most part to the exactly the material that I did during the live webinar. Okay, so so let's get on with it. All right, so basically we're going to look at creating this dashboard, and you can see that this has some nice features. It has a kind of a border, blue border. It's got a map background behind everything. It's got a little inset map over here, and a few other details. And the basic point of this video is just to show you how to do these kinds of things, make these kinds of aesthetic adjustments to a dashboard. Okay, so let's take a look at the dashboard that we're going to use. I have one here that is functionally complete, right? So this dashboard I built, and it has all the stuff that I want. It has a chart, it's got some gauges, it has some other components, some selection components, and functionally it's complete. Now, the question is, do I leave it like this, right? And so if a user were to open this dashboard, they would see it this way. And in some cases, that's perfectly acceptable. You know, it all depends on your needs. If all you need is a functional dashboard, then you're done, and you can move on to the next thing that you have to work on. But in some cases, you want a dashboard to have some nicer elements of presentation, look a little bit more polished, and so that's where the techniques that we're going to discuss today come in. It's in improving the appearance of the dashboard. Now, before we actually get to the strictly appearance matters, let's just talk about something at the intersection, or rather the border of appearance and functionality, and that is dealing with real estate on the screen. Right, so an issue that often comes up in designing dashboards is that there's a lot of stuff that you want to put on the screen, selection components, output components like gauges, charts, tables, and there's only so much screen real estate. So this creates a dilemma. Generally, you don't want to force users to scroll around on the screen to access different components of a dashboard. What you prefer to have is everything available within a single view. So let me just illustrate a few different ways that you can accomplish that. One way is by using tabbed interfaces. Right? So a tabbed interface is basically a way to have multiple components share a particular space on the screen. So for example, let's say I had a table. And I'll just add a table down here. Okay, so now this dashboard has a table. Let me make it a little bit smaller by getting rid of some of these columns. Just arbitrarily deleting some columns to make this a little bit fit on the screen a little bit better. Okay, so I have a table here. Right, and let's say I wanted to make this table a little bit bigger than it currently is. All right, so there's my table. Now, the problem is that a user who has a screen the size of mine will not be able to see that table. They'll have to scroll to see the table. And of course, if I have more components, then the problem becomes even more acute. So what I would want to do here is to try to find some way to utilize the available screen real estate to display all the things that I need, and by using a tabbed interface. And so what I can do is I can simply drag the table up on top of the chart, right, where I want it to share space, drop it there, select the option Move Component into Tabbed Interface, right, and then I've got tabs over here that allow me to select either the table or the chart. So I've got multiple components sharing the same space. And you can do of basically economizing space, and like I say, this sits at the border between functionality and aesthetics, right? Having a tabbed interface certainly has an aesthetic component to it, but it also has an important functional component to it. Other approaches to saving space can relate to selection components. For example, we've got this set of selection components here. For this dashboard, this is fine. However, you can imagine a case where you might want to add a few other selection lists, in which case you've got a lot of space on the dashboard being consumed by selection elements. So what you can do in that case is use a component called a selection container. That's this one here. Add a selection container, and then into the selection container you can place various selection elements, selection lists, range sliders, and so on. Right. And basically when you do this, these components are collapsed into that selection container, and they can each individually be expanded and contracted. And that allows you to save a lot of space by combining all these elements into a single space. Again, this has an aesthetic component to it, has a certain look, but it also has a functional component, which is that you save a lot of space on the dashboard by doing this. So tabbed interfaces and selection containers are two ways that you can deal with the space problem on a dashboard. And like I said, these both also have a significant effect on the look of the dashboard. Okay, so having put those aside, let me revert back to where we were. I'll delete that. I'll delete the tabs. Okay. And so this is back to where we started. Okay, so now we know a couple of techniques to deal with too many components in too little space. There are other techniques. For example, in a previous webinar, you can find the video for it. We looked at dynamic properties, which allows you to use either a script or an input component, a variable, to show and hide different components. So that's another approach. You could have, let's say, a radio button or a combo box over here, and a user could select which components they want to see, or the visibility of components could be set based on some other criteria. All of that is certainly an option, and those can all provide ways to deal with the problem of space. Okay, let's get on now to the purely aesthetic considerations, which is just making a dashboard look better. So the most basic thing that you can do to improve the appearance of a dashboard once it's functionally complete is to add some kind of framing effect or a border, background, etc. And the easiest way to do that is to find a shape component. Let's say a rectangle component would generally be the choice that you'd make. A rectangle component, you drag in a rectangle component, you give it a color. Pardon me, let's say I'll give it a light blue color, and then you make it whatever size you want as the background. And then the key thing is that you have to move it to the back, right? So you want this rectangle to be behind everything else. So the way you do that is you right-click and you select Send to Back. Okay, so now that rectangle is behind everything else, and that provides a kind of framing effect. Certainly makes the dashboard look more appealing. So now, if a user were to view this dashboard, it would look like this. Okay. Now, it's not perfect. In particular, what bothers me about this is the background of the chart. The white rectangle kind of is rather jarring. We'll deal with that soon. But let's get back to the design view, and let's just take a look at another approach here. So that approach is just using a simple shape background. Okay, so I'm going to delete that, and let's try something slightly more interesting. Let's try using an image background, also very common. So what I'm going to do is add an image component. All right, so there's an image component. And then I'm just going to find some image that I want to use as the background. And this could be, it could be just a plain rectangular image with nothing on it. It could be, you know, some logo that I want in the background. Could be anything. So let's find an image that'll work in this example. I'm going to go to Properties for the image component. And then I'm going to locate, what you can do is you can upload images from your own computer onto the server here. But I happen to know that there are some images already available in this skin folder, and I'm going to select this one called Background 1. This is just a very small image, just like you see here in the preview. So I'm going to select that, press OK, and there's my image. Now obviously this is not large enough to be a background as it stands, so what I need to do is turn on scaling. And there are two kinds of scaling. Let's see how you do it. I'm going to right-click on the image, select Properties, and under the Advanced tab, there's a Scale Image. There is a Scale Image option. And if I select that, then there's two sub-options, Maintain Aspect Ratio and Scale 9-Cell Grid. If I do Aspect Ratio, Maintain Aspect Ratio, then basically the image, which was originally square, is always going to remain square as I resize it. And what you'll find also is that the image is resized uniformly. Now, in this case, both of those characteristics of this method of resizing are undesirable because the dashboard has a rectangular layout, so a square background is going to look strange. And also the 1 pixel border of this image, the gray border here, keeps on expanding as I make this image larger, so that that border gets bigger and bigger to the point where the border itself is consuming a lot of space on the dashboard. So in a situation like this, we'll find that the other approach, the other method of scaling, 9-cell grid, is more appropriate. And what I can do, because I know that that border is 1 pixel wide, right, what I can do is I can specify that on the top, bottom, left, and right 1 pixel region, I don't want to scale that region and just scale the interior of the image. Right? So it's leaving the top, bottom, right, left, 1 pixel region alone and scaling the rest of the image. And the result of that is something like this, which is going to be much more useful as a background. So I can move this image, and again, you'll notice that time and again I get prompted, do I want to do a tabbed interface or do I want to move component here? In this case, because I'm not demonstrating tabbed interfaces anymore, in all cases I'm going to use move component here. Right, so I'm going to make this large enough to be a background, and then right-click and select Send to Back. Okay. So now that image, this gradient image, is the background for the dashboard. So those are two very common approaches to creating a framing effect, and that is to use a shape or to use an image in the background. Okay. Let's go a little bit further, and if we take a look back at the slide here, you'll notice that there is you can see that there is a kind of a solid background. In this picture here, it's just a rectangle background. In our example that we're doing, we have an image background, but there's also another background, and that is a map. So behind everything, there also appears to be a map. Right? So let's see how we could do that. And in fact, you can use shapes as backgrounds, you can use images as backgrounds, you can also use any other component as a background, although most components don't fill that role very well. For example, using a gauge as a background, I guess that might be an interesting gimmick in some cases, but for most dashboards it's not going to be too useful. However, using a chart as a background is an option. So let's give that a try. I'm going to add a chart. In this case, it's going to be a map chart. So initially, I'm just adding it down here, and then I'm going to set it up. Right, so I'm going to make this chart into a map type chart by clicking that option. And then I'm going to make this state field into a geographical field. Right, that allows me to use it in a map type chart. Oh, somehow it got moved. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this state field into a geographical field. So I'll select Set Geographic for that state field. Okay. And I get prompted to select various things, US map. This state field does represent states, so all that is fine. Right, so I've made this state field into a geographic field, so I can now add that into the geographic region of the map. And that gives me just a basic map. It's not displaying any measure, it's simply indicating the states that are in this current data set. So in other words, the data set that's being returned in this dashboard contains data from the states that you see highlighted here. Now I can change the color of that highlighting. What I might do is change that to a blue color to try to match the general theme of the background. And to do that, I just go over here to the color region, and instead of this flesh color, I will choose some kind of bluish color. Okay, so there's a map that I want to use as a background. The next question is, how do I do that? Well, first of all, I'm going to move it into position. Before I do, I'm going to make the image background a little bit bigger, just so I don't get confused between the two backgrounds, and I can make sure that I can select each of them individually. So I'm temporarily making this image background bigger. And then I'm going to drag the chart, this map chart, up over here. And of course I get prompted to move component here. I say yes. All right, and then I'm going to make it big enough to actually provide a background for everything. Okay, so here's this map, which is now larger than everything, so it'll provide a good background. And then I'm going to move it to the back. So right-click on that map, select Send to Back. And you'll notice that the map disappears entirely, and that's because it went behind the image. Right? So the image is now obscuring that map. So the way that you address this situation is to move the image to the back. Right? And this is, you'll find that we have to do this again and again. Whenever you're controlling the stacking order of elements on a dashboard, right, you're going to find that you will probably have to repeatedly send elements to the back. Right? So if you want multiple elements stacked in a particular order, you will have to basically you add the component, and then you send that component to the back, and then you have to send any other components that you want to be behind that component also to the back in the order that you want them to be stacked. So in some cases that can take several iterations to get the stacking order right. Okay, so now we've got this chart in the background, right? This map in the background, so that's great. The problem is that I don't want that to be so prominent. Right? So I'd like to tone down the colors and the borders in that map so that it doesn't stand out so much. I just want it to, play nicely as a background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set an alpha. Alpha is transparency for that map. So I'm going to right-click on the map and select Format for that map component. And then in the Format dialog box, go to Color, and there's an alpha setting here. Alpha, again, is transparency, and I'm going to set that to 20%. And what you'll notice is that the effect of that is that it changes the map background, in other words, the background of the map, the chart component, to be almost transparent. Right? However, it did not change the map itself. Right? So the map foreground, the actual state colors and so on, was not altered. If I want to alter the alpha or the transparency of that as well, I have to, again, right-click on an actual chart area, an actual plot area, and select Plot Properties for that map. Right? And under Plot Properties, there's another alpha setting, and this alpha setting controls the transparency of the actual plot area. Right? So this also I'll set to something like 20%. Okay, and that seems a little bit better. I might want to adjust that a little bit further. We'll see as we go along. Whenever you're dealing with the visual formatting, of course, it's a iterative process of, try this and try that until you get it just right. But I'll leave that like that for now. And that's fine. What I might want to do, though, is I might want to have that map show through this foreground chart a little bit. All right, so right now, the foreground chart, it has this white background that completely obscures the map behind it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little bit of transparency here. And I'm also going to create a little bit of a nicer border around this chart in the front. So first the border. I'm going to grab a rectangle component. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the size of the chart. And I'll give it some rounded corners. So that'll give it a little bit nicer of a look. And then I have to send it to the back because I want this rectangle to be behind the chart. Right? So here again, we're going to find that we have to do several operations to get the stacking order right. I'm going to send the rectangle to the back. Okay. Now it's disappeared completely behind everything. Then I'm going to send the map to the back. Send to back. Okay, the map goes away. And now, finally, I have to send the image to the back. Okay, so again, I'm controlling the stacking order of the various components by iteratively sending different components to the back. Okay, so now you can see that I've got this background, and I can adjust it a little bit. I've got this background for the chart. I guess that's fine. But I still need to address this issue of the transparency. So let's begin by setting the transparency of this rectangle. Again, what I have selected here now is that rectangle that's that lies behind the chart. And I'm going to right-click on this rectangle. Right. You'll notice that I'm clicking very close to the edge of it. That's because I don't want to select the chart. I want to select that rectangle. So select the rectangle, select properties, and there's an alpha property for the rectangle, and I'll set that to something like, let's say 80%. I want it to be mostly opaque. So let's see what the result of that is. Okay, so now if I make that rectangle a little bit bigger, you can see that some of the outlines of the map are in fact poking through, peering through that rectangle. Right, so that's good. And then I want to do the same thing for the chart. Right, so I'm going to select the chart. Right, so now I've selected the chart, not the background rectangle. So right-click on the chart, select properties. Oops, sorry. Did not mean to select properties. Right-click on the chart, select format. And under color, for this chart, we're going to set this alpha to, let's say, 80% as well. Okay, now I still can't see very much of the map behind. I see just a little bit, so I'm going to further adjust. Actually, maybe I need to. No, I think I'll just further adjust the alpha. Let's see if I can bring down. Oh, I thought I had just set that to. Yeah, 80%. Let me bring that down to 50% and see what effect that has. So now I see a little bit more of that map peering through. And I can continue to adjust this. Perhaps I might even set the alpha all the way to 0 and just let the opacity of the rectangle behind handle things. Let's see what happens if we try that. I'll just put this way down. If I put that all the way down to 0, so that so basically now the chart itself is transparent, and it's just the rectangle behind the chart that's basically blocking out the full intensity of the map behind. So again, you can play around with these things. Let me make the rectangle a little bit more opaque. So I'm just going to properties here. So it's 80%. I make it 90%. Okay, so now the map behind isn't really interfering with my view of the data, but you can see that it's still there. Okay, so again, you have to play around with these things when you're doing this this type of stuff. I can make the map a little bit bigger, perhaps, make it more obvious that it's there. Okay. All right, so now we've got this map background behind. And again, if you're doing an example like this on your own, just play around with the alphas until you get the effect that you're looking for. Now, one bothersome thing here is that the labels here in these selection lists are a little bit obscured by the map behind them, but that's easy to adjust. What I can do is simply give a background color for these items in the selection list, and I can do that for all the selection lists, and then set an alpha on those fills, on those backgrounds, so that a little bit of the chart, a little bit of the map shows through. So I can do that by selecting any of the values in the selection list, and then from the toolbar I'll just set a white background, and then right-click, go to Format for the selection list, for that item in the selection list, and set an alpha. Again, maybe 80% would be appropriate here. All right, so now I can more easily read all those labels, but you can still see the map behind, and I can do the same thing for these other ones. 80%. You can also set the fill color from the format dialog box, so I could do both the fill color and the alpha right from here. Okay, so now they all basically share the same properties. Okay, so this is what we have so far. Let's take a look back at our example to see what else we need to do. In this example here, I did not bother to change the background of the selection list. So you can judge for yourself which approach you think is better, giving a background to the selection list or leaving it completely transparent. The only remaining things that we have here really are the addition of a title and a date stamp, and a little inset chart over here. So let's do the inset chart first, and then we'll do the title and the timestamp. Okay, so first of all, an inset chart. How do I make an inset chart like that? Well, really, that chart is just the same as this big chart that I'm using as the background. So what I can do to save myself time, rather than completely recreating another chart, is I'm just going to copy this chart. I did that by Control, click and drag. Hold down the Control key and click and drag on the chart move handle. That will make a copy. And then I'm going to make this chart very small. All right, so what was formerly a very large chart, this version of it I'm going to make very, very small so that it can fit in the little space that I'm going to give it. So here's a little tiny chart, little tiny map, and I'm going to drop it over here, right? And I'll have to make it even smaller to fit. If I want, I can make these labels a little bit oblique to give me a little bit more space. Okay, good. Okay, so there's my little inset map, and basically the intention here is that as I make selections in category, company, and region, this little map, as well as the big map, right? These are both fully operational maps, fully operational charts. They will update to show me the regions that I've selected. So if I select USA East, right, you'll notice that both the map in the background and the map in the foreground here have changed to show me just the states that are in the region USA East. And if I clear that and instead do USA West, then I'll see the western states that are in that region. For this foreground chart, I might prefer to have it be a little bit brighter, so I can change the transparency on this guy. So let me find plot properties, and for this one I'll just put it back to full opacity. Right, so now it's fully opaque. Right, so this is the way the chart would ordinarily look. And that seems more reasonable. And so as I make selections of particular companies, for example, you're going to see that different regions of that chart will light up. All right, so the company that I selected, West Coast Customs, is in California, so California lights up on both charts. Okay, let's take care of the title. Okay, so a title is easy. A title is just a text element, so I'm going to make a little bit of space up at the top. Insert row, insert row. Okay, I'm just going to make a little bit, I guess there's enough space there. And we'll add a text element. You can add a text element simply by double-clicking in an empty region, or you can drag a text element from the component panel. And we'll just call this Sales Dashboard. And we can make that bigger and bold, all the usual things you would do for a title. And then I'm just going to move that up over here. And it's more or less centered. Not going to sweat the details too much. So there's a title, right? So that's easy. And what I'd like to do also is to add a date stamp. Right, so now, how do you add a date stamp? This is an interesting question. I'm just adjusting the borders here to make it look a little bit better. Go ahead and add a date stamp. Now, there is no, you'll notice in the component panel, there is no date stamp component, so we're going to have to do this using a text element. It's actually fairly simple. First of all, I'm going to add some dummy text. Right, that's just a text element that I created with the text in it. And then what I'm going to do is right-click on that and select Properties. And you'll notice that the contents of a text element can be specified over here. So if I wanted to change the static text that's displayed in that text element, I could just type something in here. But I can also set this using an expression, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select the expression option here. And that gives me access to the script editor, the expression editor. So I press the little edit button. And then the expression that I'm going to write is a function that just returns today's date. The function is called calc.today. So if I start typing that, right, so this is the function I'm looking for. If you didn't know the exact syntax, you could look that up in the calc library. All right, so somewhere here, there it is, calc.today. Right, you can click it in there, and that will add it. And that's all I need. That function will give me today's date. Okay, so I'm going to press OK, and now this text element displays today's date. Okay, and it will display today's date whenever the dashboard is run. So whenever a user runs the dashboard, this text element will display that date, the date on which the dashboard is executed. Okay, so I can change the format of this easily. Just right-click on the text element, select Format, and under the Format tab, I think we've looked at this in previous webinars, you can set a date format, and usually it's easy just to pick one of the existing ones and modify it to suit yourself. So I'm just going to modify this so I get a 3-letter abbreviation for the month, then the day, comma, and then 4-digit year. Okay, so this is the format that I'm looking at. And then I just stick this wherever I want it to go, like up at that corner. Or I could move it down a little bit. Okay. So so that's basically it. That's the dashboard that we were hoping to create. That's the aesthetic treatment. Again, you know, whether you would choose to do this kind of thing really depends on your own aesthetic tastes. You know, to some people this might look great. To other people it might look too cluttered, and maybe just a simple, you know, a simple solid background would be better. You know, of course, that's completely up to you. We'll come back and I'll look at making the rounded corners here, and I'll look at a couple of other things. But before we do that, let me just point out something else of significance. So I'm going to save what I've done so far, and I'm going to do a fresh preview. Right, so this is the way that a user would see this dashboard right now. Probably I could afford to make a little bit more space between the gauges and the chart, but I'm not going to worry about that now. You could do those kinds of tweaks. But what I want to point out is that this dashboard is going to display in the size at which you designed it, right? So this is the size that we designed the dashboard at, and it's going to display in this size regardless of the size that the user of the user's screen. Right, now, in some cases, that's not desirable because you don't really know in advance what size screen your user is going to have. They might have a giant monitor, or they might have a little tablet. And so what's better in some cases is to have the dashboard automatically scale to the screen size. And the way you do that is back in the design view here, you go up to the Options button. Okay, there's the Options button, and there's a bunch of different options in here, but the one that we're interested in is this one, Scale to Screen. Right, so you select Scale to Screen, and what that will do is it will automatically detect the screen size that the user is using, and it will scale the dashboard to that screen size. There's another option here, Fit to Width, that will basically make the dashboard fill up the entire width, whereas if you leave that unselected, it will basically try to maintain the proportions of the dashboard. Okay, so if I select Scale to Screen, press OK. Right, you won't notice any difference in the design view, but if you do a preview, what you should see is that this dashboard now scales to fill the entire screen. Now you'll notice that there's empty space on the top and the left, and that's because I have that empty space in the design view. If I want to get rid of that, I can delete some of these extra rows, or I could simply move up all the components on the dashboard, but I might find it easier just to do this. And let's see, I could I could move everything a little bit to the left, but I think I'll just leave it like that, and that will get rid of some of that unnecessary space. Okay, so that's an important technique to be aware of, that you can automatically scale a dashboard to fit the screen. Now, the one caveat is that when you're dealing with automatic scaling, it does try to maintain the relationship between all the components in the dashboard as best as it can, but sometimes things don't go exactly right. For example, here you can see it's trying to scale this inset map proportionally to the rest of the dashboard, but it ends up that this the inset map overlaps a little bit over here. So, so if you're using this technique of scale to screen, what you'll probably want to do is to actually test out the way it looks on different size screens. And of course, you could do that. You don't actually have to use different devices. You can simply resize your browser window and try opening the dashboard in different sizes of browser window, make sure that everything looks okay, and do whatever adjustments you need to do in order to make it look better. So in this case, I might want to perhaps make this a bit smaller so that when the dashboard scales, it doesn't end up overlapping. Okay. Now I said I would take a look at making the rounded corners, and then one other thing, and then we'll wrap it up. So rounded corners, so I can't do that with the image, but what I can do is let's see if I can. Yeah, actually, probably what I do, I don't have a gradient image available that doesn't have the border, so I'm kind of stuck with the border of this image. What I would need to do is I would need to get an image, a gradient image without the border. Right, and then I could put around that a rectangle. Right, so something like this, I would grab a rectangle. And just try to get it into the right position. And this outer rectangle I could give rounded corners to. And send it to the back, and give it a similar color, like a blue, baby blue color. Okay, and so then that would give me rounded corners, and in fact I could even even in this example I could it doesn't look all that bad, and in fact it might look better than the way it looked before. So again, you have to decide for yourself, but this is a way that you can handle that situation where you have an image and you also want rounded corners, you could just use the image and use an image without a border like this one, and then just put a rectangle behind it with rounded corners and match the colors. Okay, one other thing that I want to just to mention is that what we've done here is we've used a map as a background, and that's great. But you might also want to, in some cases, use an image as a background, like I mentioned before. But in some cases, you don't want to necessarily upload a image from your own computer, but you'd rather refer to an image by URL. So let me just illustrate how you could do that. And to do that, I'll remove this map. All right, so remove that map background, and I'm going to find a different map background. I'm going to look on the web, and I have this map over here. This is on some website that I found. I just did a search for maps, and I found this one. And so I want to use this map. So one approach I could take is I could download this map and then upload it. Right? I could create an image component. Where is the image component? Output, image. All right, so here's an image component. I could go into the properties for the image component, and I could upload that image, right? So I could download it from the website and upload it over here, and then that would be available. However, I can also refer to that image directly via a URL. Right, so if I go to the Advanced tab of Image Properties, there's a dynamic image selection here, which typically is used to change an image based on an input component or based on an expression, but you can also use this just to specify the URL of an image. And so that's what I'm going to do in this case. I'm going to find that image, copy image location, right, that gives me the URL, paste it in there, right, and now this image is going to be referenced from that URL. So basically it's going to pull that image from the URL. Right? Every time the dashboard runs, it will look up that URL and grab the image. And of course that means that if the image at that URL changes, right? So if somebody at that website changes the image, then the image will change here as well. So there's an image referenced via URL. Now what I'll want to do is I'll probably want to set some scaling for this. So in properties for the image, I'll turn on, I'll try the 9-cell grid scaling with no border set this time. Right, that will allow me to scale this in a rectangular fashion. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put this as a background, so that involves 2 steps. First of all, I need to get the stacking order right, so I want this to go basically behind the entire dashboard. All right, so put it up there and just kind of enlarge it until it covers everything. Okay, so something like that. Then I have to get the stacking order right. In other words, I want this to go behind everything except for the other backgrounds. So I'm going to do send to back, right? But then I know that I want this this image behind it, so I'm going to do send to back for the image. And then I know that I want this this rectangle to be behind everything, so I'm going to do send to back for the rectangle. Okay, so now I have basically the stacking order right. I've got my rectangle background, I've got my image background, and I've got this chart background. But this chart background, the colors are rather intense, and they kind of distract from the rest of the dashboard. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to somehow tone down the colors in that map. How do I do it? Well, my first instinct would be to try to find an alpha setting, a transparency setting. But if I do that for this image, I'm going to find that that doesn't have the desired effect. Right, so I'm going to look for format and let's say color, alpha. Right, it doesn't really have any effect on the image. So so what are my options here? Well, basically what I can do is I can create a veil to go over that image. I can take a shape component, like a rectangle, and I can cover up that map with the rectangle. Of course, initially I'll be covering everything, but ultimately I just want to cover the map. All right, so I'm going to cover up the map. And then I just want to, move this rectangle to the correct place in the stacking order, which means in front of the map, but behind everything else. So I'm going to send this to the back. Right? And then I'm going to send the map to the back. And then I'm going to send the other backgrounds to the back. Finally, this guy to the back. Okay, and now I need to find that rectangle. Let's see if I can find that. No, which one is this? Is this the rectangle? Yes, that's the rectangle. Okay, so here's that rectangle, and what I want to do is I just want to give this rectangle some transparency so that it partially lets through the map in the background. So I'm going to right-click and select Properties and set an alpha here. Oh, set an alpha to, let's say 70%. Okay, and you can see that now that's letting the map bleed through a little bit. Right, so that's letting the map bleed through a little bit, but not too much. So that is just that's just another approach to doing this kind of thing. If you want to use an image via URL, that's how you do it. And if you have an image and you want to modulate the colors in the image, you can do that by putting a shape component in front of the image. So we're going to leave it there with this example. And so basically what we illustrated is how you can use either a shape, an image, or a component such as a map or any other chart as a background, how you can adjust the formatting on other components, adjust their transparency. Now you can do something like an inset map or an inset gauge just by putting one component on top of another component. And finally, how you can dynamically and automatically adjust the dashboard size to the size of the user's device by selecting the scale to screen option in the dashboard in the view sheet options. Okay, thanks very much for listening. Hope it was helpful.